Hey everybody, Pastor Scott here, offering a reflection and a response back to your responses. Here we go with our responses to responses. Following this past week's confirmation lesson on the human condition. I want to say thanks again for getting your information in. Great responses, some very thoughtful responses. So thank you for doing the work there. That is wonderful. Just a couple of things that I want to sort of follow up on. And then we did have a couple of questions that I'll kind of address right at the end. So as we started looking at what was the basis of the temptation that the serpent used for Adam and Eve, what did he use on them? And it seemed to be the thing, and you all really picked up on this, you will be like God. You will know good from evil. You will be more than what you are now. And so maybe it's pride, maybe it's just the desire to be like God or to be God or to be the center of the universe and to think that we're the most important thing. That really seems to be the basis for what the temptation that goes towards Adam and Eve is. Now, what is the result of the disobedience? That was another question that we asked, and you all seem to be picking up on various aspects, and we sort of boil it down to the idea of shame. They recognize that things are not as they're supposed to be. They recognize now new aspects of truth that they didn't realize, and we see that as they know that they are naked. The man and woman know that they're naked, and they feel shame about it, so they cover themselves up. So there's this difference. It's just this shame idea. Now, maybe this stems from knowledge. Now, knowledge in itself is a good thing, isn't it? But there are certain things that we might learn that then we wish we hadn't ever learned. And I'm going to make a little analogy here. I compare it to some of the wonders of technology that we have developed that are used for destructive purposes. Now take weapons, for example. I was actually having a conversation with someone earlier today on this very topic. The idea that there are certain things that we have invented or that we have found or that we have discovered that then are used for destructive purposes and we wish that we hadn't. Maybe this is the same sort of idea as now this knowledge that Adam and Eve have is something that they wish that they didn't. So maybe that all sort of makes sense there. Then we ask the question, so what happens when God shows up and asks them, what have you done? And you all picked up on this too. They all start blaming other people. Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent. So we play the blame game. We make excuses and we say, someone else to blame. It's not my fault. Whatever happened, yeah, it's not right, but it's not my fault. And you all continue to realize as well that we still do the same thing now because we are still broken, we are still selfish, we are still really good at passing the buck, I call it. And that's something that started with this story of Adam and Eve and continues on through that. From there, we started talking about what are the consequences and you all listed them in different ways, and we hear about them, with the consequences that Adam faces, the consequences that Eve faces, the consequences that the serpent faces, and then even the consequences for the garden, that humanity is cast out of the garden. Humanity is separated from this ideal paradise, if we want to call it that, but essentially everything becomes harder, everything becomes strained, and everything takes more effort, and all of this stuff. So this idyllic, harmonious vibe, if we want to say that initially existed, is now over with and broken, and this carries on, and we see this, as you all picked up on. It's not only limited to Adam and Eve, it carries on through the next generation and subsequent generations as well. Some of you picked up on, or actually all of you sort of picked up on the idea of broken relationships. That really seems to be the basis for this. We have the broken relationships between individuals. We have the relationships broken between the individual and God. We even see issues in the relationship that the people have with themselves and the relationship with the world. All of this seems to be connected. This idea of brokenness within our world, within our reality. Now, again, like we talked about, we don't start there. We start from the place that's good, but the brokenness is still a reality. Now, this is actually a little bit of a preview for when we start talking about the Ten Commandments. Now, this is down the road just a little bit. Once we get through Genesis and we get into Exodus and Moses and the Israelites and coming out of Egypt and getting the Ten Commandments and all of that, and we'll get there. And then we'll also talk about this more in depth next year when we are talking about the Small Catechism. But this idea that the Ten Commandments are really aimed at our relationship with God and our relationship with one another, and that they're ways to continue to live in harmony, which I believe is what God intended for us in the first place. So it's all connected. It's all in there. The last thing that we sort of talked about, one of the questions that I posed for you to talk about, is the idea of repentance. What is repentance? Now, we've talked about this a little bit before. Perhaps you've heard me talk about it. But the literal definition of the word for repentance means to turn away from. So like if I'm going in this direction, it literally means to turn around and go the opposite way. And that's kind of what repentance is. It's an opportunity not to change what has already happened, not to change the behavior that lies in the past or the brokenness or the sin or the damaged relationships or whatever. It's not an opportunity to change that, but it's an opportunity to turn away from it and turn back towards the good that I believe God intends for us. Now, can we do that perfectly? No, of course we can't. Do we need help with that? Absolutely. And this is where the idea of forgiveness comes in. Now, one of you actually brought this up, and I want to sort of talk about this real briefly, that it sort of almost implied that forgiveness and repentance are the same thing, and they're not. They are two different things. Repentance is on the part of the person who caused the harm or is walking the wrong path. Forgiveness is on the other end, offered back to them. Now, does one lead to the other one? Yes, we hope so. Does it always happen? No, but that is the hope. But they are two different things. They're opposite ends of that broken, strained relationship. So we have the repentance and the effort to make up for it, and then we have the forgiveness that is offered. So, and we'll talk more about that, but that's a distinction that I just sort of want to make. So that's just a real brief recap of that. Now, a couple of questions that came up. One question came up, why did God accept Abel's offering and not Cain's? You know what? That's a great question, and I'm really glad you picked up on that, because that seemed to be the basis for Cain getting angry and killing Abel in the first place, isn't it? Because God favored Abel's offering over his. Now, why? We don't know. That's not listed in the scriptures. We don't know why God showed favor to one and not the other. But what's interesting about this, we know that Cain was the older brother. And in this society, the older brother, the oldest brother, I should say, is the heir. It's the one who is favored. That's just the way that the society worked. And here we see that God favors the younger brother. God favors the unexpected one. And this is a trend that we will see over and over and over and over again when God uses or blesses the unexpected one. Now, we won't see that this coming week with what we've got going on, but 2 weeks from now, we'll begin to see that theme emerge. So we see just a glimmer of it here, and I'm glad that you picked up on it. The last question, and this one it's a good one. If Adam and Eve produced the first offspring, where did Cain's wife come from? And were they related? Maybe. We don't know. That's a great question. We see in chapter 5, which of course we didn't get to, but we begin to see some genealogy type information of who's related to who. After the whole Cain and Abel incident, Adam and Eve have another son named Seth. And we also hear in the verses following that they had other sons and daughters. So Cain and Abel were not the only two offspring of Adam and Eve. There were others. So is it possible that Cain's wife, whoever she was, because we do hear about her briefly, was a sister? Yeah, it's possible. We don't really know. And here's the thing to think about with this. Remember, these are stories. They're not necessarily historically accurate stories, because these are stories that reveal truth that were passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation for thousands of years before they were ever written down. So this tells us some truth about that human experience, that broken human experience. But what it doesn't necessarily give us is what are the historical accuracies? Like, were there other people around by this point? Maybe. We don't know. So is Cain's wife from another tribe or from another family or from some other people? Maybe. Or was she one of the sister, a fellow descendant of Adam and Eve? Maybe. We don't quite know. So there's definitely some ambiguity there, but I'm glad that you're picking up on those things and you're catching those things. Thank you for posing those questions. I'm sorry I don't have a real great answer, but that's just kind of another way to think about it. This one got a little bit longer than I wanted to, but wanted to give that response back to you. Thanks for some great, thoughtful responses and answers. We're looking forward now to this week and the video, and we're looking at the flood, which means Noah. Dun, 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 dun. So look for that later on in the week. Thanks, everybody.